I'm very sympathetic to putting the characters in that plot and giving them agency so that they can become stronger people that you would want to cheer for along the way, not just to survive, but to continue to grow, to make mistakes, to suffer with them when they make the mistake, and to see how they can grow because of it.
Hello, Mark. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for
Thank
being here
you.
today.
Oh, Mark, I really appreciate it. Thanks, and thanks for all you're doing for thriller writers and readers everywhere to get these books out to people and introduce them to new authors. It's a great platform, and thanks for doing it.
You're welcome. Thank you. I have your book here with me, Kill Them All, a great read. I'm very excited to talk about this book because there's so many things I loved about it. So let's get into it. Let's start with the pitch before I pitch it for you by talking a bit too much about it.
Okay, well, let's start by imagining a scheme where 12 victims in 12 months would be killed in 12 cities, and distance becomes part of the distraction, and the motive becomes part of the mundane, and everything becomes hidden in the noise. But why would you choose to do it that way if you didn't want to take credit? Now imagine that there's this washed up poker playing mid 30s guy who's a brainiac, but he's very good at pattern finding. But his aversion to authority has ruined his career, has got him fired from whatever jobs he could get. He's now worked himself through a marriage. And he's to the point where the only way he can survive is to hustle college kids at poker games. And then comes a knock at the door he doesn't deserve, and his former Harvard roommate, who's now an FBI agent, brings him this puzzle. It's early May, and three men have died under unusual circumstances. Can he find a pattern? Well, he does. Otherwise, it would be a very short book. But he does. But from there comes this cooperation and this chance that he has to do to be able to turn it around. And so what starts out as a quiet scheme in the background becomes a chase across the United States to stay one step ahead of Hannah and this FBI task force. And before he can get to the end, he knows he's got to be able to take this temper he has, turn it into teamwork, and discover the one thing he needs. And that isn't just where or who, he needs to find out why. So let's begin, because the calendar is ticking.
Thank you. That's a wonderful pitch. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very well done. So let's start from the beginning. Where did this idea come from?
I had been at a Toronto Blue Jay game. I probably look up the day. It was the final Tuesday in April because they have dollar hot dog days. So my son and I met our daughter who lives in Toronto. We went to the game because Joey Chestnut, who always wins the Nathan's Hot Dog 4th of July hot dog eating contest, he'll eat 70 in 10 minutes. He was throwing out the first pitch. I think he's the greatest living athlete. Can you imagine eating 70 hot dogs in 10 minutes? This guy's a beast. Anyway, so I got a chance to meet him through radio contacts, and we enjoyed the game. And I had watched a Jeffrey Deaver masterclass podcast video he had done on YouTube because I just finished my second book and I was beginning to plot out my third book. And he said some remarkable things, including why kill one if you can kill 10? And come up with a title that's just so explosive it jumps out off the shelves because you're amongst so many others. And make the theme as big as you can make it, the motive and the theme behind it. So this was all kind of stuck in my mind throughout the day. On the way back, I'm on the GO train from Union Station to Oshawa for an hour. My son, of course, has his earbuds in or he's sleeping. And I have an hour to sit there. And I probably conceived 50% of the plot just sitting on the train, thinking about, well, one, don't kill one. Well, what about 12? What about one a month? And what I kept landing on was something thriller author Linwood Barkley had talked to. I'd interviewed him a couple of times. And he starts all of his plotting with what if. What if you woke up and your entire family was gone? And for 25 years, you never knew why. And that was the beginning of No Time for Goodbye, his breakout book. Wasn't his first, but his big first breakout book. So I didn't want to do what if. I'm always really enthralled with why would. So why would somebody put together a plot of 12 people in 12 months in 12 cities? I like the idea because everybody could follow that. It's not a difficult thing to believe in. You could follow it throughout. And when people that I know have read the book, they've told me, I'm at July. I'm at August. That
Yeah.
becomes how they understand the plot so well. The chapters become important. It's all about what month you're in. So I thought but why would that have to work? So it was putting together a client and a killer and the victims that would make sense of a plot that had to be done that way. And like I say, probably by the time I stepped off the GO train, I was probably 50% of the way there, which as an author really is the easy 50%.
Yeah.
The rest is the small details in the editing and making sure that, yeah, it's plausible and it's realistic, but it's still thrilling and coming up with all of those details. And so that's where it came from. I was very much inspired by Jeffrey Deaver, Bone Collector fame, on really saying, take what you like, but blow it up, make it bigger.
Did you consider that an outline when you were doing that, or did because that was your outline when you were on the train?
I did do an outline because that was the end of April. I then went back to Toronto. Thanks. It's funny you mentioned that. I went back to Toronto again for the first weekend in June for Motive, the thriller and crime writers festival. Again, Linwood Barkley was there, Sherry Lapino. I got to meet Anthony Horowitz there, who was not only a hero of mine, he got my son reading through the Alex Rider series. So to get a chance to talk to him and thank him on behalf of what he did for my son to become a reader. So I got to meet a lot of really great ones. And as I told them afterwards, I went there looking for information and I left with inspiration because I took what outline I had that Monday, the day after I got back, and I wrote the first draft of Kill Them All in 7 weeks. I was so
Wow.
inspired by what I heard, not to be afraid to write with abandon because you're just going to clean it up in editing. I always try and write a clean first draft, and I still catch myself doing it. But don't get so lost now in the details that you miss the big joy of what your story is. So I really went with abandon, hoping to get it done and edited sort of for the fall of 2023 for the querying season of the fall and ended up hitting it. Got an editor in New York to work with me on cleaning it up in time. But the outline of things like what are the cities? What are the methods of death? Who are the victims? So I have these sheets that I went through and then matched them up. Probably spent maybe a month on it. I was mowing my lawn when I came up with one of the key details that links the victims together. And I went, ooh, that's an interesting way of going about it because I know how the book ends. It's a little bit of foreshadowing. I thought, oh, that's a good one. So mowed the rest of the lawn and went back, write that one out. And once I had all of that, then I said, and then the inspiration from that writing festival. And if you're a writer, I suggest do the best you can to go to one of those. You don't have to go to that one, but one that's close to you, even if it's just for a few hours. So very inspiring to hear
Yeah.
other people's journeys, especially ones that I think are at the pinnacle or at the top, that say you're never really that far. If you've got a book in the marketplace, you're ahead of 99.9% of anybody who's ever wanted to write a book, let alone has something available for publishing. So to go at it with abandon, trust your story, trust your voice. And if the outline's good and it's plausible, you're probably going to find a place for it in the marketplace. So
Nice.
that's what I did by the time I was ready to go. Labor Day of 2023, and I got picked up in April of 2024, released May 6th here of 2025.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Mm,
That is a very
thank
fast
you.
turnover. And
Yeah,
that's
and
seven
I heard
weeks.
that too. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Especially if is that the first book you've ever written through this inspiration?
No, I wrote two others that have been shelved. The second book was the first thriller. The first was something I had because when I was done the morning show, I used to go for a walk before I would go back and record commercials and stuff. Well, the radio station just happens to be beside Belleville Cemetery. So if you're looking for inspiration, and one day, because I'm so brave, a white plastic bag blew out from behind a tree, and I think I fainted. I might have screamed. Because I'm thinking
Yeah.
about things. Because when you're in radio, you're 4 hours on the air, 20 hours preparing. Everything becomes the bit. As Jerry Seinfeld says, you're never truly present. You're always looking for the next thing to talk about by observing what's going on. And then I thought, oh, well, that would be crazy. That wouldn't be a ghost. And then I thought, well, if that was a ghost, why would a ghost step out behind a tree and want to talk to me? And that became a book called From Ashes. And that took about a year of outlining. And then in the pandemic, 2022, my daughter from Toronto was home with us. And she said, Dad, when are you going to write that book? When are you going to write that book? So I probably took 6 months to write the first draft of it and thought I had scaled a mountain when I typed the end, because you think, wow, I wrote a book. And then the funny thing is, once you've done it once, you find you can do it again. The
Yeah.
second was a thriller I've always had in my mind called Give Me Death, Give Me Liberty, or Give Me Death. And I really like that. And I was going to start working on editing and querying that when Kill Them All entered my mind. And I said, no, I think this is the one I really want to work on. This is the one I think that has a better shot. So this is the third. I've since written two more that are coming out next year. And on this past weekend, I just finished my sixth book. And then I'm going to go back and give Them Death a shot. I'm going to Give Me Death. I'm going to work on the edits to that because I think that's a good one too. And I think I'm a better writer. The work with the editors has made me a better editor.
Hmm.
Um, so as they say, nothing's ever shelved. Shelved for now,
Yeah.
but you can always go back and revisit an idea, revisit a novel, revisit a manuscript or an idea. Don't kill your darlings. Just tuck them away somewhere. You're going to use them in another book. If it was a good idea, maybe it isn't for that book, but
Yeah.
it sure could be somewhere else.
That's an impressive turnover even from your first novel, because one thing I hear a lot is when authors say, and me included, that it took many years. I think I spent like 10 years on my first book, just on and off, and life and everything else gets in the way.
Of
So
course, yeah.
that's great that you also did. You've been quite prolific right from the get-go, almost from 2020.
Lee Child of Jack Reacher fame, I bought a BBC masterclass of his, and I really enjoyed it too. And one of the things he says is, and it's one thing that I've done talks at libraries, and you tend to get the older demographic who will come out to a library, which I love, thank you. And I always tell them, if you're here as a writer, it's never too late and you're never too old. Because as Lee Child said, I don't know, and I agree with him, I don't know if I could have been a writer at 30. I don't know if I had to wait till I was 59. I'm 62 now. I don't know if I had to wait till I was 59, but I know that sped up the process. Yes, I write in my radio and speech writing capacity, and I understand the need for brevity. I understand the need when you're on the radio. You've got to get in and you got to get out. So there's not a lot of wasted language. So when I talk about a clean first draft, I understand that first page desire, that first chapter desire, and why the last page and last chapter should lead into the next book or should leave them with wanting enough to say, wow, what else has this guy written or this woman written?
Yeah.
So I started with that already. I don't have an aversion to editors, so the process of trying to get a book published is not unlike being in radio and having somebody do what's called an air check, where they listen to your show, make suggestions on how to make it better. And here we are in baseball season with the Jays. I think of editors, it's like a first base coach. They're not running the bases, but they can see everything that's going on. They're editing other books so they know where your book's going to slot in. And you know what? If you can kind of tuck it a little bit more over to this side and lean a little bit more into that theme, that's going to steer away from what everybody else is doing right now and really give
Yeah.
your book a chance to shine. An editor can do that. I know some people are like, oh, nobody's going to tell me what to do. And that's all well and good. But if they're going to offer from a publisher to get you that editor, I think what a gift to be able to have somebody who has eyes on the full look of the industry to say, this is where your book's going to fit, and I think it's going to be strong, or this is a good first effort, or all of the things that you can get, and then use those tips moving forward to become a better writer. So I thank you for the compliment. I was surprised as well when it got accepted in May. It was on the shelves 13 months later. But I think that might be because of my age that I'm easier to work with, I think, than I would have been when I was 30. Well, I'm sure we'll get into the book, but somebody asked me, how much of Robert Hanna is you? And I said, all of Robert Hanna's bad characteristics are me. And the bumper, the hired killer, and that's not a spoiler alert, the first two words of the book are
Yeah.
the bumper, I think at the beginning of the book have my best qualities about a little bit more about the patience versus the aversion to authority, which when you're a smart aleck morning guy, you don't like people, so all of these things I had to evolve to become better. played out on the page the way it worked out. So yeah, 59, I think I was probably right. But to your point about being prolific, I'm running out of time, Mark.
Yeah.
So, so many books. If I can sit down now in retirement, it's just my wife and I now. So I think I can peel off two a year, which I've been doing. And
Nice.
I've been lucky enough that my publisher enjoyed Kill Them All enough. Sales have been good that they jumped on the next book. And then I said, I have the follow-up to Kill Them All done. They're like, zoink. And then said, let's do two in 2026. And so that one will come out as well. So I'm very excited about that. Busy,
That's
but very
awesome. Yeah.
excited. Yeah.
Yeah. As I was reading Robert Hanna, I also was thinking ahead on your behalf, being like, I was thinking, wow, this would actually make a great series. You could write another book because he's such a fun, unique character that you could definitely write another book. So I'm excited for that next book you have coming out.
Yeah, thank you. The follow-up was really fun to write, and my son and I went hiking in Algonquin Park this summer, and he's 32 years old, so he doesn't want to go at dad's pace, even though I thought I kept up pretty well, but not that good. So he'd always be about 100 feet up. So I would have 4 hours to myself. And so I said to him on one of the paths, I said, you go, just stay within eyesight in case I fall down. But I'm going to conceive the next Robert Hanna book. And so on that 4 hour, I think I came up with the plot for the third book, um, which I do want to have a series of them. And I've got characters, and we'll talk a little bit about it. I don't think of them as secondary characters because in Kill Them All, every character has agency.
Mhm.
Everybody is affected at the end of the book. Nobody gets away unscathed. And so some of these other characters could have offshoots of their own books, or they get to shine a little bit more with Robert playing a part. And I think of the great Michael Connelly that way,
Yeah.
who will have Bosch or who will have the Lincoln lawyer.
Mhm.
But one of the other characters, like Rachel Ballard, will be included and work with Bosch. So then she has a twist and you can do different things with it. I was very conscious of not pigeonholing them into these specific roles. People get promoted at the FBI, people retire at the FBI, new people come
Mhm.
into the FBI. So he's this outsider coming in, but so do other people. And so you begin to have different dynamics and different plots. And I'm excited about it. Very excited about the follow up to this called Echoes of Death when it comes out. I really enjoyed exploring the characters a second time based on where I left them, but continued to evolve with them. I really enjoyed that process a lot.
When you originally created all these characters, how did you make them so distinct? Do you have a profile sheet or like, they say like an interview where you interview your own character to find out as much as you can? X ends up
Yeah,
in the book.
well, I appreciate it because I don't think I went that far. There was a movie, M. Night Shyamalan movie, it's called The Woman in the Water. I don't know if you know that one.
No.
It wasn't very good. I mean, listen to me. But the whole idea was that there was this monster, and I think it was in the pool of an apartment building, and all of the characters were really weird, and they all had a unique sort of sense about them. One guy had a massive arm and his other arm was skinny. Somebody I think had tremendous. And anyway, at the end, to save the woman, they all had to use their like the guy with the one strong arm had to lift everybody. It was sort of like, wow, it's a good thing all of these characters had their unique. So what I did is I sat down and said, okay, I'm going to need a character whose major thing is he's going to be first in the room. He's the most eager. He's not trying to upstage anybody. He just loves what he does. He's going to work behind the scenes because this is what he loves to do. Jacko Sims. Then I'm going to want a female character who is going to go out because she loves the hunt. This is what she does. She's not like a boss, but she's working for the FBI for a strong sense. She knows what she's up against, and she's been preparing for this moment. Rhonda Perez. Then, of course, I have characters in there who are wasting time, and we get rid of them pretty early. So Robert has this aversion to authority I talk about. Well,
Mhm.
the captain at the FBI is not going to put up with that crap. And he's going to become this father figure who's going to help mold him into place. And then his best friend has own skills and his wife. So I said, I need characters who bring these sorts of things. So I looked at them from their skill set and what they could bring to the story. And that was how I characterized them. And then from there, I really just wanted it to work. There are a couple of places in the book where I would kind of change it or I would morph it. I would take it back and say, I know, and then go back to the beginning and add something to their skill set. I did that very much with Robert's ex-wife in the book because of the way the ending originally was in the first draft, which is not the way the book ends. As happens, I've learned on many books that the ending that you think, because I wrote it to get to a spot. I wrote it to get, and I don't know if you're at the spot yet, because you said you have 60 pages left. I don't know if you're at the spot yet. And then what happened before and after that, I wasn't sure what was going to happen because that spot isn't the ending, but that was the spot where I wanted people to go, wow, okay, that's what this book is all about, the theme, that's what this book is trying to say. And then I'll end it somehow. But then I realized, now I can't do that. And I had to go back and kind of change it. And that involved evolving these characters to get to those points.
How did you know it was ready when you had done that? Like you had your first draft, you know you wanted to send it to an editor for publishing, but that's one of the hardest
Yeah,
steps is when you have to
yeah.
decide, is this thing ready? Am I just changing words for the sake of changing words and I think I'm making it better, maybe I'm not? When did you decide like, okay, this thing's ready to be sent off. I've done everything I can.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question because somebody said to me, when does a painter know that's the last brush stroke?
Hmm.
And I went, boy, that's so true. I had worked on it for, the 7 weeks and edited. I talk about Lee Child. His way is he'll write 1,500 or 2,000 words. And then before he begins the next day, he'll go back and edit the previous day, a few words here and there. It doesn't work as a full edit, but as he says, it gets you back into the story, gives you a little bit of time to rework some of the language, and then so that when you start, yeah, you're right back where you were. So I knew when I was done, it was a pretty good, and I worked on it for a couple of weeks. Then I hired an editor out of New York by the name of Ken Salikoff, and I sent it to him and to what I think is a tremendous amount of money from somebody who didn't have a lot of money. But I spent more than I wanted to because I knew it was good and I knew I wanted to rush it, which in hindsight I probably didn't do. I wouldn't suggest people do that.
Okay.
But again, at this time, I'm 60 years old and thinking you only get so many shots. And I think this is a good book. I could have waited another year. I could have waited 4 more months. But I really wanted to strike while the iron was hot on it. So he read it in about a week and then started working on it. And I got impatient. It was probably the week before Labor Day. I had been working on the pitch package and all that stuff. And I emailed him and said, well, what do you think? Because I thought if it's garbage, he'll tell me. And as I said, I put it in the acknowledgments. He sent back, if the ending hangs together, I think you have a winner here. So to hear a New York editor say that was not something I was prepared for. It was not something I ever would have told anybody he's going to say. And to this day, I don't know that it's a winner. But again, as somebody who reads it, I have to trust him more than I trust myself.
Yeah.
Um, that gave me a lot of confidence moving forward. And then I bought in. I really bought in. So I loved your Instagram that you did. Thank you about the signature that
Yeah,
I
love
did.
that. Yeah.
Because yeah, my query letter did a lot of that. And the rules state I should never do that, but I so bought into the characters that the pitch package is a taunt, just
Okay.
like the client and the killers are taunting you throughout the book, so that the pitch package is exactly what the book is going to sound like. They say, if you're writing a romance, you should have a pretty, wistful query letter. If you're doing a horror, it should be a little bit at the edge of your seat. Well, mine is very taunting,
Hmm.
very schemy. And so I got a lot of rejections as I expected. But what I was hoping to find is just that was one or two agents that said, I know what you're doing here. And I understand that and I got a couple that asked for more pages and I'd never gotten it with the other books. So I sort of knew I was on my way. But ultimately, one said, I don't know an editor enough who would want a book like this and fight for it. And somebody else said, not quite there, didn't like the ending. And then I got a handful of hybrid publishers that said yes, so I pay half, they pay half, but I
Okay.
wanted to stay traditional because I knew I wanted to retire and I didn't want to spend any more money. Ken got all my money on this book. And then Between the Lines Publishing came in, which is an independent publisher, small one out of Roseville, Minnesota. And they've been great to work with. And away it went. So all of that was, I've got to buy into everything. And so it isn't me. The whole book is the client's taunting of this 12-month scheme and why they would do it, as you're about to find out, and maybe you have some ideas. And because it is, as I put in the pitch package, the who is what you're going to get to, but the why is what's going to keep you up at night when you're done with the book. And it's
Yeah.
literally ripped from the headlines today. I was shocked with how the world is evolving. And a friend of mine asked me if I was a time traveler when I wrote it 2 years ago. How did you know that the world is going to start feeling this way about the rich? I said, well, it's always felt this way, that they would
Yeah.
take this steps and take matters in their own hands. Couldn't have guessed that. So let me
Yeah.
point out, this was never meant to be a manual on how to do it. It was always meant to be a warning. And it's just so strange how it's playing out now in the headlines around the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you say you had to really believe in it because I think that's very true. How did you go about believing in it? Because there are so many steps along the way that could almost crush a writer when they want to believe in it. You've done very well in that you got an editor fairly quickly or someone picked it up fairly quickly. But prior to that, like how did you go from even this book is done to I believe in this book? Or was it just the editor and his feedback that just sparked that motivation and then you ran with it?
Well, as you know, on page 82 of the book, I tip the cap to Agatha Christie. I come right out and
Yeah.
say it. And, in some of the books that inspired this plot because they sort of run along. And I think because I was very much grounded in reading those, we all talk about if you want to ever become a good writer, and I don't profess to be one, but if you ever want to be one, you have to be a prolific reader. And there were plots that I absolutely love. There are authors I absolutely love, and they are must-read authors for me. But to be completely honest and not terribly complimentary, I was growing a little tired of these slow burn domestic thrillers. Not that I don't like them, but there's a lot of them. And I won't say they all sound the same because then I sound like my dad when the Beatles came out, right? But I think the point is you begin to say, well, no, I know where this is going. I may not be right, but there's nothing there that can surprise me anymore. And it's sort of like, oh, I didn't guess that, but here we are. And it was well written and I liked it. And then I'll pick up another one. And so I think when I was sitting on the train, which really made me commit, is I want to write something not just totally different, because that's dangerous, because people want what people want. People want
Yeah.
the same, only different. So I thought if I can ground it in the love that I had of Agatha Christie's books and Jeffrey Deaver's books. I sort of have the plot of an Agatha Christie, but the pace of a Jeffrey Deaver. And then let's add the geography of a Dan Brown. So let's like have a wide landscape with really tough, thrilling details. But the plotting that Agatha Christie had, I thought I can really chew on that because I love all three of those. So I got in the mud on those and I sat in it and I wrote it and I believed in it and I didn't get away from it when people said, I don't know, I don't think I want to pick this up, or it's not enough for me, or no, it didn't really grab my attention. And I would think, oh boy, if this one doesn't grab your attention, but all of these other domestic thrillers that were starting to bore me or something were so predictable, why did you grab that? Does everybody have to write like that? And I thought, no, I'm going to stick in because I don't think I can write those. And I really wanted to write these. And so I think that made it easier for me to buy in because I knew why I was doing it
Yeah.
and didn't want to give that up. And again, is it for everybody? No. Is it going to be a bestseller? Don't think so. Again, that wasn't the point. The point was to say, this is a different book because I can't write those with any kind of conviction. Because to me, it was just like, yeah, I enjoyed it, but it's like the last 10 that I just read. What I really want is something that I can really get my teeth into. And that's why I wrote this one and believe in it so much.
That was very plot driven. Would you say you're more of a plot driven writer than character, where you build the plot first? What attracted me a lot to this book right from the get go. Oh, I liked it all. I could preface
No,
that
I
by saying I
understand.
liked it
Yeah,
all,
I
but
understand.
the character of Robert Hanna is what got me into it right away. And I love when he's with the FBI and he's cocky and then he's put in his place, which is all very early in the book, so just
Oh
not a
yeah,
spoiler.
no
And
spoiler.
yeah, and I love that about him. Like and then I got right into him, and from there I bought into the plot and the rest of the book.
Yeah, I think I started with plot. No, you're right. One of the things that I really wanted to do, which I wasn't seeing a lot of, and that is character arcs in thrillers and mysteries. So if we go back to Agatha Christie, for example, Miss Marple doesn't change. Hercule Poirot doesn't change. They are those characters, and we want those characters, and we like it. But I thought I really wanted to have a character arc that would make you want to cheer for him or her, cheer for all of them. As I say, none of them are the same character at the end of the book as they were at the beginning. Does
Yeah,
it make it more challenging? Yeah, it does. Is Lincoln Rhyme, just to borrow, or Jack Reacher, these characters in thrillers, do they change every book? I don't think they do. Are the authors bad not for doing it? No, not at all.
mhm.
But my difference was is I really wanted to bring somebody to see if you could like him because of what he puts himself through, how he changes at the end, which you'll see you're not quite all the way there, and leads itself into the next book for those that survive this one. When you begin to anticipate, oh, as he's grown, like the Hunger Games, of course, that's how you like Katniss so much, the way they grow throughout it. And I wasn't seeing a lot of that in thrillers. So I think I'm plot driven, but I'm very sympathetic to putting the characters in that plot and giving them agency so that they can become stronger people that you would want to cheer for along the way, not just to survive, but to continue to grow, to make mistakes, to suffer with them when they make the mistake, and to see how they can grow because of it. That's real police work. James Patterson talks about that. 60% of the police work, you should be wrong because that's what happens. That's what investigated means. You try this, you get these clues, you check that out. Nope, you go, you interview these people. Nope, that isn't right. But, oh, but then I found this out. And so you can't Sherlock Holmes it where they're right all the time. But you should want to cheer with him when he's wrong, that he doesn't give up. He wants to learn. And the
Yeah,
people around him take what information he can give. And I say it a few times in there just for plausibility. Look, guys, I don't know what I'm doing, but I see this and I think it's this. So how would we put that into the investigation? How would you ask or investigate that if I think this is going on? So the way they all try and put the whole thing together. And yeah, maybe you're yelling at the pages because, of course, as a reader, you know far more what's going on in the plot than any of the characters because you know everything until you don't. And that's when the twist starts. And I was talking at a library about that. You have a dog, for example. It's like when you're walking with your dog, and then you stop, and the dog keeps going. Well, that's what I do in the book. And then you kind of stop and go, "Wait a minute, how did I get here? I thought we were." And then you realize, "Oh, you stopped giving me information. I did, and I let's let you go with it." And then that's what, because to me, the best twists are the ones where readers fool themselves. Now, I don't have to lie or bury or ignore or almost become an unreliable narrative. I'll just give you all the information and let the characters think they know what's going on, and then you can go, oh, no, 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 I know where we're going with this. And that's like, I wasn't close at all, or I wasn't right. Where did I miss that? And you realize, no, I missed that because I assumed that I knew everything that was going on. And there's a point of the book at which that stops, and now you've got to figure it out for yourself.
yeah. How do you want a reader to feel when they're done, when they finally put this book down? What's that final feeling you want them to have?
As I said, when Jeffrey Deaver talked about the biggest theme it could, and I don't want to give away the theme because I think they're a little bit of a spoiler, but I think without doing that, let's say this. I'd like the reader to feel like I've either given them or challenged them to look at their worldview. That why would somebody go to the extent of killing 12 people in 12 months over 12 cities so that they could hide what they're doing and not want to take credit for it? And then when you find out what links the victims and why they chose to do it that way, why they had to do it that way, the things that you discover about the victims along the way, the things that Robert Hanna discovers about himself along the way, and how none of the characters are the same based on the explosive ending. It changes the way we look at how we structure society and the way we look at our resources and the way we treat each other. Yeah, it's pie in the sky. It's big, but again, it's it's not meant to be a mission impossible where it's like pushes the plausibility and I can't believe he survived with a second to go.
Mhm.
It's we've figured it all out. Now that we know what happened and it's over, what are we going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? It isn't just what would I do if I was in that. Robert Hanna talks about it, for example, when he begins to think of himself. What if the killer came after me? Like, what does that say about me? And that's, I think, what I want the reader to begin to see, that it's a situation born of society and characters, as you mentioned, because it wouldn't have happened if they weren't the characters that they were, and come away thinking a little bit about the worldview, the way things are.
I love that. Thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to that explosive ending and feeling those feelings. I'm going to be finishing it tonight, so I'll let you know.
Excellent.
So, a couple of quick wrap up questions. What advice would you give someone who just published their first or second book? So they've gone that step. What advice would you give them?
Get into book signings. Now, I have a radio background, so I'm not afraid to do public speaking, to sit there and meet people and sign books. My daughter, she mentioned she lives in Toronto. So she contacted me when the book came out, and she said, "Dad, here's the contact for Indigo at the Eaton Center." I was like, whoa. So I reached out and they said, "Sure, we'll order 15 books and let's do a book signing." So do them, ask, and you shall receive. It is amazing if you just ask. Either an Indigo near you, a private bookstore near you, the library, just to do a quick talk. If you think you can do that stuff in public, it is amazing how many people do want to meet authors. So I would say get yourself out there. I like social media. I don't think it's the be all and end all. Just like you do this podcast and you're on all platforms, that's more important than trying to just get a huge following or buy a huge following on social media. I think there's still a lot of room for meeting readers. Gives me a chance to steal some names for another book. But then because there's nothing like that feedback. As I mentioned, I did a library talk for 10 people. I drove half an hour to a small library just up on Highway 7 down from Ottawa. 10 people were there, and I loved it. And one of the people there had read the book from the library. So, oh, well, I didn't get any money off that. Didn't care. She loved the book and immediately went looking to see what else I had written. And so, oh, well, that was just his first book. And then was shocked when she saw that I was going to be coming into the library to do a talk. So the things I said, well, what did you like? Which of the murders was your favorite? Because that tells me a little bit about the way this reader liked the book. The way it was plotted. Did you find that one just so shocking, underhanded? Did you hate that character the most? Like, so you get a chance to get all kinds of feedback on the plot and the characters, as you say. And that may not teach you a lot about writing, but the two aspects of writing are writing and story. So maybe you can become a better writer, but the things you get back in feedback can probably create better stories down. It's like, okay, they're really like these kinds of characters. I'll make sure and really double down on those on the next book. So, yeah, so I would say do book signings and get out there and get a chance to meet people. And I think always be writing. Sometimes John Grisham was telling the story I saw it the other week, where when A Time for Kill had been picked up many years ago, his first book, he finally got an agent. And the next day he called his agent. The agent said, "You are not going to call me every day." Because he thought, oh, well, did you sell it yet? Is it going to be published yet? Like, this is not how this works. So get out there and write another book, because it's going to make you a better writer when the editing comes along, kill some time. So yeah, once you're published, and I have met a wonderful writer that I met at a festival. It's her only book, and she can't even conceive of trying to do a second book. And so I thought, good for you, you're Harper Lee, until they started dragging out all of her manuscripts. She had only written To Kill a Mockingbird for 60 years until they started dragging out some old scripts. But if you can stay busy and work on other projects, I think it just makes you a better writer, and certainly
Yeah.
read a lot. But yeah, I'd say get out there with it. Be proud of your book, because, Mark, the figures over time, how many percentage of people who say they're going to write a book, the percentage of people who start writing a book, and the percentage of people who finish writing a book, and then the minuscule number who manage to get it published, whether it's self-publishing, which costs a lot of money and is a viable path that takes so much skill because you're everything. You're designing the cover, you're editing, you're promoting. And even though I have a radio background, I didn't feel confident I could do that. So I did the traditional route because I wanted the experts. And part of it was my age. I don't have a lot of time left to spend a lot of time and money trying to learn all of that. So I defer to the experts that way and was lucky enough to land a small, wonderful publisher. I don't know what would have happened if that hadn't happened. We certainly wouldn't be talking. And the other three manuscripts I've written, I don't know what would have happened to them, but there they are. So I'm very happy with the way it worked.
Yeah, well, it's a deserving book of having
Thank you.
caught that.
Yeah.
Where can listeners find your book and hear more about you?
Well, for the most part, it's available. As I say, it's a small publisher. So if you're listening in the United States, it's not on shelves at Barnes and Noble, but you can order it through there. You can order it through Amazon. Canada, you can order it through Indigo. If you're here in the Quinte region in Belleville, they told me, they gave me a number. I think I've sold 134 copies in my hometown, which is about 130 more than I deserve. Part of it was I did morning show radio here for 25 years, so everybody knew I left to write this darn book. So a lot of people came out to book signings just to say hi and be supportive. The ebook is also available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. It's available on Kobo. And because of my radio background, if you haven't guessed, yes, I recorded the audio book. So I went out and bought all of the equipment that I need to create a home studio. And that was a wonderful experience because I had to learn pacing and I had to learn part reading, part storytelling. And I had to learn what echoes, how do you down the sound, and is this pitch? So my daughter in Toronto, of course, when she would commute, I would record 3 episodes or 3 chapters. Then I'd email and she'd listen on the way home. Still too tinny. I think you're going too fast. That's a horrible accent. Don't do anything. So until we got to the end, and she said, "No, okay, this is a good pace. Okay, you figured out the technology now. That sounds really good." And I would put it into the Audible website where they check these sorts of things, and they said, "No issues. This is perfect." So it's like, okay. Then I went back and redid the whole darn thing again,
Wow.
so that everything could be perfect. So Audible has, and I've sold 49 audiobooks. So that's been fun as well. But yeah, so all the major outlets online and some selected Indigos across. There's one left in London. There's two at Green Hills in Toronto. Some at Eden Center. They've kept stocking it because it keeps selling there. Thank heavens. And then mostly online.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I've really enjoyed hearing
Appreciate
this
it.
story. I have probably another 40 questions prepared for you that we
That's all
just
right.
ran out of time. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. If you don't mind taking a few more minutes of your time for the after we record this main episode for our Patreon members, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if you enjoy it, my follow-up, Echoes of Death, will be out in the summer, but my next is a standalone called With My Little Eye. Curious Widow, A Shy Prowler, and The Wrong Window. It's coming out in early spring, so I'll say first week of April, give or take. And that is a story that came to me from our retiring police chief who was on the radio show. And I was looking for a character to go with my widow, and he gave me the Prowler, and away this book came. So it's funny where you get it. When you meet people, you talk to people, you get the craziest ideas for books.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of crazy ideas. So
Yeah.
Mark, I greatly appreciate, again, not only your support for me, but for all authors for writing and for thrillers, because I know thriller readers come to this genre as critical readers. We don't You can buy a Carly Fortune and you want to be swooned. But many people pick up a thriller saying, well, you better fool me, you better thrill me, you better
Yeah.
have the goods. So it's a more challenging genre to write in, to become successful in, and certainly to get your name out to. And I'm ever so grateful that you gave me this opportunity. Thank you.
I'm happy to. Thank you.